Welcome. This is Jen, the Liberty Lion. I hope you're all staying sane. It's a crazy world out there, and it's getting more and more crazy. The propaganda that has been spewed upon us by the freaks, uh, it's just overwhelming. So I'm going to take a few minutes and try to tell some truth here. What I want to talk about in this video are enacting clauses, the acts, and the legislation, the difference between the United States and the United States of America. So the first thing we need to understand is that the United States and the United States of America are two separate entities. The United States of America makes laws for the United States. The United States of America directs its acts towards the United States. Therefore, the United States is the servant of the states. It legislates by way of the United States and Congress assembled. The acts are orders to follow, ordered by the states. And the states, when they get together in Congress, are called United States of America. The states, when they get together, are the sovereign power of the thing that it created. And the thing it created works for them. So you have a servant master situation here. The master are the states when they get together and call themselves the United States of America. The servant is the military, and when it gets together, it's called the United States. So the United States of America and the United States, two separate entities. The United States of America is when the states get together and convene as a Congress. The United States, however, are the federal lands. And these are also called military posts and the seat of government. When the United States of America writes acts, the acts are for the United States. The United States are under the control of the United States of America. In other words, the military is under the control of the states when the states convene as a Congress. The military is the United States, and the states, when they get together in their collective capacity, are called the United States of America. The United States, in its most basic sense, is a military force, reduced to performing federal works on federal lands. Those federal lands are listed in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution. Those federal lands are called seat of government, commonly called Washington, D.C., and, quote, places purchased, end quote. And those types of places purchased are military posts. The laws of the United States and the laws of the United States of America are not for the people of the individual states. The laws of the United States of America and of the United States are not for the individual people of the individual states. The United States of America writes acts for the United States, and the United States then legislates by way of statutes, codes, rules, and regulations on how those acts will be enforced upon the federal people of the federal lands. We can look at the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. In reference to, quote, legislate, to enact a law, to bring into action, to establish in the form of positive law or written law, begins with be it enacted, or it is ordained that, or by authority of. An act is written to the United States by the United States of America. This tells the United States what they need to do. The enacting clause of the United States of America is, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. This enacting clause of the United States of America comes from the Articles of Confederation, and they dictate to the United States, and then the United States writes acts or legislates. Another example is an act to raise an additional army force or military force. Section 1. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that there be immediately raised 10 regiments of infantry, 2 regiments of artillery, and 1 regiment of light dragoons to be enlisted for the term of 5 years unless sooner discharged. This is the enacting clause. We see in the enacting clause, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America. Notice it states, the United States of America, not the United States. The United States of America is the sovereign power. The Articles of Confederation stated that the powers, rights, and jurisdictions were expressly delegated to the United States, and it was delegated to A, or A in legal terms means one. So one Congress. The United States are for a Congress. We can see this enacting clause in the very old acts written by the free, sovereign, and independent states when they act in their collective capacity, calling themselves the United States of America. And this is the enacting clause. We need to be perfectly clear on what we're talking about here. The Articles of Confederation were written by an independent nation or collection of independent states. Those states in their collective capacity are called the United States of America. The United States of America created a military service provider, and the United States of America gave its service provider certain rights and obligations. Those rights and obligations are in the Constitution and the Articles of Confederation. And to people in the service of the United States of America, which are the military. Those people who serve the collective states, or those people who serve the United States of America, are we the people, the United States. These people have no sovereignty. They have rights, powers, and jurisdictions. I know that this is a very hard pill to swallow, but the truth is the truth. The United States is, by all appearances, a non-sovereign, having no independence, having no freedom, military, which serves the states in their collective capacity. The states in their collective capacity called the United States of America. In the preamble of the Constitution, we see, when we summarize it, the people of the military are under orders to do what they are told, and they are told by their master, and their masters are the states in their collective capacity, and their master is called the United States of America. The United States of America is the master, and the military servant is called the United States. The Articles of Confederation stated, all states are free, sovereign, and independent, and retain all rights, powers, and jurisdictions not given to the servant, the United States. When we read the Constitution, we do not see any sovereignty, independence, or freedom given to the United States military servant. We see only powers and jurisdictions and some rights. We do not see the creation of a military country or nation. We see only a confederation of states, which kept all its power except for what it gave to the military servants, and that those military servants completed the necessary requirements for the states to be a nation. Every nation must have a national defense. The United States is a national defense. Here I will show you an act passed by the United States of America for the United States to follow. This is the first judicial act, and even though this is very difficult to see, I've written here what it says. It says Congress of the United States. So this is as if the United States of America is writing to the Congress of the United States. This is not saying we the people of the Congress of the United States. No, the writer of the document is down here. You'll see that when I read the rest. So this appears to be a letter or a command or an order to the military, the United States, from the states, which is the sovereign power. This act establishes the courts of the United States. Quote, Congress of the United States, comma. So this is like saying, Dear Congress of the United States. Begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 1789. An act to establish the judicial courts of the United States. And then the enacting clause shows that the act was given to, or the dictate or command is to, Congress of the United States from the Congress of the United States of America. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that the Supreme Court of the United States, and it goes on. This is almost the same way in which a memorandum is written. When you say to Congress of the United States, location or place, we did this at this place on this date. The date usually comes first. For what? An act to establish judicial courts of the United States. Or in a memorandum, it would say RE, an act to establish the judicial courts of the United States. From the United States of America, or the states in their collective capacity, the sovereign power. We know that the United States of America is the sovereign power because it states so in the Articles of Confederation. And for people who have a hard time believing that the Articles of Confederation are still good laws, you can look at the preamble of the United States, in which it says, we the people of the United States, which also means we the people of the military, promise to do these things for, or keep these things safe, keep these things free, for the United States of America, meaning Congress of the United States works for the United States of America, or the military works for the states. It couldn't be any other way. Legislation, or the thing that the Congress of the United States military is supposed to do, is to keep an accounting of things, to legislate, to put on a ledger. This is an invoice of ordnance and military stores. And at the bottom, it says War Office of the United States, Timothy Pickering, 1795, I think that is. There's the enacting clause. The acts of Congress, when it says Congress, it's not talking about a Congress of the United States. It's talking about a Congress of the United States of America, because there's two Congresses. There's a Congress of the states and there's a Congress of the military. This is the laws of the United States, and it's telling the law of the United States, or it's telling the United States military that the enacting clause is formalized in the United States Code, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. I have a book I would like to show you where it actually has the laws. Take me a minute to find it. A lot of people bring up that in the Constitution it says these are the supreme laws of the lands. And I just want to clarify that the lands in the Constitution are the seat of government and places purchased for forts. That's the laws of the Constitution, which are the laws of the federal government. So I found an old military book. It's actually not a military book. It's an old book of laws from 1812. And we see here the United States of America making law for the United States. And then what the United States would do is they would follow the law by legislating it, by writing everything down, by placing it in statutes, codes, rules, and regulations so that the troops could follow it, the commissioned and non-commissioned officers, and so that the justices could understand what they were supposed to do. So this is from around 1812. This is actually the bottom of what was first passed, this above part. So this is an act to regulate the pay of the non-commissioned officers, musicians, and privates of the militia of the United States when called into actual service and for other purposes. So if we were to look back at the Constitution, we would see that in Article 2, Section 2, which is the presidential powers, it states that the president is the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, not the United States of America, and the militia when called into actual service of the United States, not the United States of America. And then in the Second Amendment, we see that the right to bear arms, necessary to a free state. The free states are the United States of America. The militia is of the United States of America unless they're called into service of the United States. So each individual state has a militia. When they're called into service by the United States of America, the states collectively, they work for the commander-in-chief of the United States. And I don't know if this is hard for other people to understand. It's not hard for me to understand, probably because I was in the military. I've been reading all this stuff for a long time. I've been studying it. I was a regulatory enforcement specialist for the Department of Defense. So I sort of have the mind, I guess, to be able to understand the differences between these things. I hope that you can understand it. If you're not understanding it, please post comments in the comment section and I will try to answer any questions that you have. So you have the United States of America under the Articles of Confederation being the sovereign power, which dictates laws to the United States, which is the military. And then the United States Military Congress figures out how they're going to write all of these laws in a regulation so that the military troops can follow them. So it says, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that from and after the passing of this act, the allowance of bounty, clothing, and pay to the non-commissioned officers, musicians, and privates of the infantry, artillery, and cavalry of the militia of the United States when called into actual service. When they're called into actual service is when they're actually on duty. They're actually being paid. They're actually working for the president as commander-in-chief. They're actually working for the United States as a benefit to the United States of America. When they're not called into actual service, they are just in their individual state, and each individual state is to have its own militia. Now, there are other laws here that have nothing to do with the militia. Maybe this is one of them. Let's read it. An act supplementary to the act entitled, an act authorizing the President of the United States. When it says the President of the United States, it's talking about the commander-in-chief of the military and the militia when called into actual service. When it says the President of the United States of America, it's talking about the President as the executive officer of the free, sovereign, and independent states. Okay, and that's in the Constitution. To accept and organize a voluntary military corps. So this sounds like it would be related to the militia also. Section 1. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that in all cases where volunteers have offered or hereafter shall offer their services to the United States or the military under the act entitled, an act authorizing the President of the United States. President of the United States is commander-in-chief of the military and the militia when called into actual service, to accept and organize certain voluntary military corps. Okay, let's see if we can read a different one. Let's see if we can find one that has nothing to do with the militia. An act supplementary to an act authorizing the President of the United States, it's the commander-in-chief of the military and militia, to raise certain companies of rangers for the protection of the frontier of the United States. Section 1. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, be and is hereby authorized to raise an additional company of Rangers when he may deem it necessary for the public service, and on the same time provisions, conditions, and restrictions of the Act to which this is supplement. And be it further enacted that for defraying the expenses thereof, the sum of $11,250. So the money that the United States needs comes from the states, the United States of America. So if the United States of America is going to give the United States a job to do, it has to come with the money. The expenses have to be paid for. And so the United States says $11,250 is what they have to do this thing. And so when you have these ledgers, this is how they account for all the money that they've been given by the states, the United States of America, and where it all went. And this is in the Constitution, that they have to keep a ledger of these things. And the ledger has to do with the legislation. The War Office of the United States. So when we look at Article 1 in the Constitution, it says that the Congress of the United States has a power to legislate for the United States. So the Congress of the United States has to keep these ledgers. That's their job. To show back to the states, this is what we spent your money on. An act respecting the pay of the Army of the United States. Now, so you see, it says the Army of the United States, not the United States of America. America doesn't have an army. America has a United States, and the United States has an army. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that the officers, non-commissioned officers, musicians, and privates of the Army of the United States shall receive the same pay, forage, rations, clothing, and other emoluments as the officers of the same grade. So here, the United States of America is telling them they have to be fair in how they divvy up the money. They can pay these people this much, and these people this much, and some other people a different amount. And it specifies in here what they can pay. And so then the Congress of the United States, when it divvies up this money, has to keep the ledger. And if you do research on the word legislation, it goes back to ledger and accounting, to account for all the things that they have spent money on. An act making further provisions for the Army of the United States and for other purposes, be it enacted by the United States of America, that the Commander-in-Chief be and is hereby authorized by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to appoint 2 brigadier generals. So under the Articles of Confederation, the free, sovereign, and independent states have gotten together and they've allowed the president as the commander-in-chief under the Constitution, commander-in-chief of the military, to appoint 2 brigadier generals. Most of these laws were all passed in 1812. This was a very short time after the Constitution was signed. It was before Texas joined the Union. And so when Texas joined the Union, it would have the understanding that this is the way things were. in some case laws afterward, we see the United States trying to overcome the United States of America and take lands that it wasn't given and pretend like the whole state of Texas was property of the United States when it's not. It's only the federal lands used for defense purposes or the military posts that are constitutionally allowed to be negotiated for military purposes or purchased, and then the laws made for those areas. So when the United States of America or the states all together get together in a Congress and write these laws, and they write them for the United States, which is the military, writes the laws that apply to the federal lands. And that's in the laws also. And you can see those in the most current laws available on the internet. An act to provide for designating, surveying, and granting the military bounty lands. So the states get together and they write a law allowing the president to do some things for the military under the presidential powers. An act for the more perfect organization of the Army of the United States. Remember, the Constitution says a more perfect union. Be it enacted by the United States of America that the infantry of the Army of the United States shall consist of 25 regiments, and that a regiment shall consist of 1 colonel, 1 lieutenant colonel, 1 major, 1 adjutant, 1 paymaster, 1 quartermaster, 1 surgeon, 2 sergeant's mates, 1 sergeant, 2 principal musicians, and 10 companies. And just so you know, the reason why they had musicians was they had a flutist and a drummer. Anyone who joined the military had to be the age of 21, and unless you were a musician, you could be 18, but you had to have your parents' permission or your guardian or master's permission. In all other cases, you had to be 21. And when you add up the so many years being in the military with the age had to be 21. So if you say 21, and then you look at the Congress, the requirements for the age of a representative is so many years a citizen of the United States, and you add 21 to the years that they're required to be in the military, a citizen of the United States, you come up with the age requirement. So you take the age requirement and minus the number of years they had to be a citizen of the United States, and you come up with 21. That goes the same for the president. You take the president at 21, you add 14 years of military service, and you get 35, which is the age requirement for the president, as well as the 14-year requirement of being in the military. So a citizen of the United States is someone who has been in service to the United States as a military person. And the numbers all work out. An act to amend an act entitled an act to establish a quartermaster's department and for other purposes. It's a command from the United States of America to the military called the United States. You can read Article 2, Section 1 and Article 2, Section 2, and it further clarifies what I'm telling you. You can also read the conclusion paragraph of the Constitution where it says that the United States of America is independent, not the United States. And so the United States has no sovereignty or freedom because they are a subject. It's a military and the military is subject to its master, and its master are the states. An act for a better regulation of the ordinance. Section 1. A dictate from the states that there be in the military established an ordnance department to consist of a commissary general of ordnance, an assistant commissary general for deputy commissaries, and as many assistant deputy commissaries as the President of the United States, acting as commander-in-chief, may think necessary, not exceeding 8. The licenses, permits that we think that we're supposed to have as free people are also for the people of the United States. And anyone who does business on federal lands is supposed to register their business. It's not the people, us individual people of the individual states who have to register anything unless we're doing work for or with the United States, the military, on federal lands, on military post, or at the seat of government, on the lands at the seat of government. And that is because we come under the direct jurisdiction of the United States, because the military is responsible for everything that goes on the military lands, on the federal lands. They're responsible. So if something happens, they have to answer to the public as to why they allowed something bad to happen to one of the people that were working on the military post. They have to account for anything that they pay for. So if they hire a contractor, the contractor has to agree to follow the laws. They have to be paid. All this has to be accounted for in their ledgers, their legislation, their bills, which go back to the United States of America to be scrutinized and looked over to ensure that there's no stealing going on, to ensure that there's no briberies, there's no theft, anything like that. Because remember, the United States is supposed to use gold and silver, and that's easy to be stolen. And there was a lot of stealing going on back when the seat of government was trying to pay its officers on the military post. And it would have these people transporting these bags of gold and silver, and they were getting robbed or they were stealing it and running away. Well, when that happened, they realized that they were going to have to allow the federal government to come off the federal lands to investigate or to go and catch these criminals that were federal people working for the federal government, carrying these bags of gold and silver to the military posts to pay the officers and the other military people. That they had to investigate them, they had to go find them, and so the states had to allow the federal people to come off the federal land to do that. But it also worked in reverse. So when someone came off federal lands, and let's say a military member murdered an innocent person off federal lands, and he ran back onto the federal lands, the state wanted to be able to go onto the federal lands to investigate the crime or to serve a summons or whatever rights the state, because they each individually retained different rights, some same rights on the federal lands. So you have the federal lands, the United States, off the federal lands, the state, and then all the states together, the United States of America. This says be encamped at least 3 months of each year and taught all the duties incident to regular camp, that the candidates for cadets be not under the age of 14, nor above the age of 21 years. This is an act for making further provisions for the Corps of Engineers. So the free, sovereign, and independent states, when in Congress wrote this law and passed it for the military to figure out how to follow. So then the United States writes the laws for the military to follow, also for their civilians who work on post with the military to follow, and also for any contractors who come onto the military post to either build buildings or put in sewage systems or whatever they needed them to do. They also had to follow these laws, and they had to register, and they had to be licensed, and they had to get permits. It is not off the federal lands where small business owners or even corporations have to go to the Secretary of State and register everything they're going to do and make sure we pay taxes and all these kinds of things. Those laws were never supposed to be for the individual people of the individual states. Because really, when I read the Articles of Confederation, there's nothing in there that says that the states in their collective capacity can pass laws for all the states in general to follow. So like the Uniform Commercial Code, if that was supposed to control the free people of the state, it was never authorized to be passed. And it probably never was passed because you see it as a uniform commercial code, but it's not an actual law. I've never seen any law that's an actual law that's the Uniform Commercial Code. An act for the organization of a corps of artificers. So I want to show you something else, and I show this website all the time. And it's important really to understand what this website is and what the positive laws are. And I mentioned positive law, I think in this video, something else I read. So Title I, General Provisions. You see the asterisk here. This means that this was passed into positive law. It complies with the dictates of the Constitution. You see Title II, the Congress has not been passed into positive law, and so it's not a Congress of the United States. It may be a Congress of the United States of America, but it's in the USC, which is the United States Code, not the United States of America Code. I know only that the United States has a code. I know of no code of the United States of America. So there's a lot of laws here that have never been passed into positive law, meaning that they're not laws, and that not being passed into positive law doesn't mean that they're not laws. It means that they can be applied, but they can only be applied on federal lands. And even when they are passed into positive law, they're still applicable only to the federal people on the federal lands. So the positive law means it's been passed into positive law, and so it has to be followed until it's repealed. But things like domestic security has not been passed into positive law, meaning it's not in the Constitution, but it's something that they do. Something maybe for contractors. So when you join the military, you go through a process of them making sure you're not a terrorist. And that's been around for the beginning of the Constitution. But when they have contractors coming on to federal lands, they don't come under the same constitutional requirements because they don't join the service. So domestic security would apply to people who aren't under contract serving in the United States. And that's the way I see it. Aliens and nationality. Military members, they get married. And when they get married, their wife or husband may be an alien, maybe from another country. That happens a lot. Their children may be born in another country. So they would need to have a way to become citizens. So banks and banking is not a law for anyone off federal lands. Commerce and trade, conservation, not laws. Education, customs and duties, food and drugs. So education may have been something that they thought was beneficial to the people on the federal lands, but it's not in the Constitution. So a long time ago, soon after the Constitution was written, some families were complaining that they had children and they lived on the federal lands. Their families lived on the federal lands because there was a very distinct separation between the free people of the state and the federal people on the federal lands, and they didn't really mix. So the families were complaining that they had no education system for their children. And so they came up with the non-positive laws on education that allowed for there to be money allotted for educational purposes to the children on the federal lands. It's the same with food and drugs, foreign relations and intercourse, hospitals and asylums. There were no veterans hospitals. There were no insane asylums for veterans or their family members. So they needed all the things on the federal lands available to them that the people off the federal lands had. And one way that they did that was they allowed for a contractor to come in, and the contractor worked sort of like a nonprofit organization. And they did things. They put on dinners, they put on dances, they collected money, and then that money is used to help pay for these non-constitutional things. If you were in the military, you may know this as MWR. Some of this has also been done through the Internal Revenue Code, where they take money from people who don't owe the money, which are the free, sovereign, and independent people of the states with all their rights, powers, and jurisdictions over themselves and their own income. And they get them to buy lies, deceit, manipulation, propaganda, get them to sign papers or agree to be sort of contractors or gift givers to the Internal Revenue Code so that the IRS can then funnel this money into all these programs that they have on the military posts that are non-constitutional. And so they're not given money by the states. They take it directly from the people of the states, which don't owe it. And then whatever's left, they give it back. They give it back in the way that they choose. So they give it back to the schools, and along with that comes mandates. Like, okay, so we'll give you this money, but you have to do this. We'll give you this money, but you have to do that. For some of these, some of them work different ways. Food and drugs. You know, what is that really? Intoxicating liquors. So they just take more money off of the sale of liquors or the licenses and the permits to sell liquor. And then they take that money and they funnel it back to the people of the states in the way that they see fit, or they put it back onto the people on the federal lands and use it in whatever way they choose. Labor, labor on the federal lands, mineral lands and mining, so on and so forth. So each of these have a little bit different way in which it works, and that's why they're in separate titles. Public health and welfare, um, public lands, railroads. People who work on the railroads receive retirement and all kind of benefits that a lot of other people don't receive. And there are railroads on federal lands, and people who work the railroads on the federal lands. You notice territories and insular possessions is not a positive law. Title 50, War and National Defense, not a positive law. Voting in elections, not a law, okay, because it's not constitutional. So I could probably go on and on for a little while longer, but I want to leave this here and give you something to think about. Let me show you the beginning of this book in case you want to go find it. Rules, okay, an act establishing the rules and articles of the government of the armies of the United States with the regulations of the War Department enacting the same. So the whole United States is Army, Navy, militia. That's in the Constitution. The Coast Guard, Air Force, Marines are not in the Constitution, but I don't really argue too much of those. They're added later, kind of a necessity for some purpose. I'm not sure about the Coast Guard being a necessity, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to teach you how the United States of America are the collective states in their sovereign capacity. They dictate laws to the United States, which is the military, and we, the people of the United States, are the military. The citizens of the United States are the military, and they take the acts that are passed to them from the United States of America, the states, and they write them onto ledgers, and they receive money, and they show how all the money is spent and how they made these acts real, how they are carrying them out, because they have to show everything that they do. The only thing they don't have to show are the things in the Articles of Confederation that they're allowed to keep secret. Again, that's a video for another day. Okay, so with that, thanks for being here with me. Thanks for listening if you've listened to the end of the video. I think you've learned now why the United States of America and the United States do not make laws for the individual citizens of the states, of the individual states, how the laws of the United States of America and the laws of the United States are not for us. That the United States is a military. You read the Constitution, you can see it. The citizens of the United States are the military. The citizens of the United States are the people of the United States, which is in the preamble as we, the people of the United States. And in the end of the Constitution, you can see that the United States of America is the independent state, which the Articles of Confederation say are free, sovereign, and independent with all rights, powers, and jurisdictions not expressly delegated to the military, called the United States. And that in the Second Amendment, we see that the free states have all their rights, including the right to bear arms, and bear arms means to defend yourself. It doesn't mean guns. It doesn't mean weapon. It means to roll up your sleeve, get to work, and defend yourself, defend your property, defend your family, defend whatever you think needs to be defended, because arms, another word for arms, is power. But the free state are your state, your republic, not the state of Texas, not the state of Tennessee, not the state of Virginia, but the republics and the commonwealths of these states. Those are our governments. That's where we belong. We have nothing to do with the United States of America or the United States unless you're in the militia and you're called into actual service, or you're trying to bring back your republic and move yourself from the state of whatever back into the republic. I've made videos on this. The law is modern. It's in the jurisprudence manual, at least it is for Texas, where it says the republics retain all powers not given to the United States, and the United States powers are listed on the Constitution, and they apply on the federal lands. And the only time the military can come off the federal lands is when the governor of the state calls the president and says, I need help. Can you send the military? Okay? So this really ends all the tyranny. This ends all of our problems. This ends taxation, because taxation is theft. And if you have any questions, again, post them in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. And I really, truly hope that you can understand everything I've said. If not, I'm happy. I'm here to help. I'm happy to help. All you have to do is post it in the comments section.